this on the backs of taxpayers, that would increase our taxes 14 to 17% for an 800-seat auditorium with 57 parking spaces. So you hear different numbers of our population. Are we 82,000, 83, 85, whatever it is? It's an 800-seat auditorium that would benefit 1% of Johns Creek. I am for working to where we help the arts community get viable other alternative solutions, but not increasing our taxes. Where I will go with what we need to do in our city is not a performing arts center. We need a 5th fire station. That's what we need based on our population, not a performing arts center. I will agree with the mayor, probably this is the only thing we'll agree on, that I do not want anybody in the arts community to feel demonized. That is not this. This is a policy issue on should we increase our taxes for this or should we not. It doesn't have anything to do with individuals, with their talents and with their abilities. We have many spaces in Johns Creek for people to perform. If it's at churches or halls or amphitheaters or our country clubs or our schools, there are plenty of places for them to do what they need to do. But not this. This is not the way to go. So that's where I diverge. But I would never want to make anybody feel like that they were not supported. We can give other alternatives in addition to this expensive performing arts center.
Actually, I've already gone.
20 questions, you start losing track.
Okay, sorry. What is the new plan? What is the new plan for the Macedonia Cemetery?
It looks like what the city has done is to get rid of its responsibility and give that to a third party who will care for it. I personally believe that it is a very important part of our history in Johns Creek. That cemetery was founded back sometime in the 1800s. And it was in the responsibility and care of Fulton County. And then the city of Johns Creek ended up saying, we will take it. I don't know why we would ever do that if we're not going to fund it and care for it. That is a sacred ground that needs to be cared for. There needs to be ground penetrating radar to figure out where all of the deceased are so they can properly be having the headstones where they need, and we just know how to care for that. We need to know how to care for that history of ours. So for me, I would want it to be part of Johns Creek and how we care for it, maintain it with our history.
Macedonia Cemetery is a sacred space. The first meeting I ever had when I became a city council member with the city manager at the time was about us doing a fence or something to secure that site. I spent a fair amount of time up there. It is completely inaccurate to say that we have abandoned the cemetery. You have to think that it is pretty unusual that we took the step that we did to buy it basically from Fulton County because it had been basically abandoned. And we were at a point where if the city did not step in, there were no descendants at the time that were recognized. If the city had not stepped in when we did, I think that the site would have just fallen into complete oblivion. It is something that we have looked at to see if the descendants would be interested in taking over the cemetery, just like we have other cemeteries throughout Johns Creek where the descendants, the ancestors, the families, are the ones that are caring for the cemetery. But we have continued to do the basic maintenance. We continue to monitor that site, but we are not in business of repairing headstones. That, I think, at some point the city government has to draw a line between what is preserve and protect versus what is archaeological in nature. That site has been studied at least 3 different times. Preserve Johns Creek, we hired New South Associates to do an archaeological study. They did it forensically by hand. Then GDOT, they did a form of GPR. And then before the city bought the site, we also had GPR done. I know that there are people in this room that don't like the GPR results or don't like the way that was done. But to say that we have not examined and have not taken care of that site is just completely inaccurate.
Thank you. John, stay there.
He has been waiting years to be able to tell me where to sit and stand.
Do you think a city's population size influences where it could be considered safe? The safest cities in Georgia and their population, Sonoya has 5,000 people, Douglas has 12,000 people, Milton has 41,000 people, Johns Creek has 82,000 people.
Well, let me just say this. Earlier, my opponent talked about that we need a 5th fire station. Okay, so if you remember back 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, there was a big debate about whether or not we needed a 4th fire station. That 4th fire station was built because we had basically 2 major pockets up Johns Creek that were getting service response in slower time than what was our standard. And so to eliminate those gaps, to eliminate those slower response times, we built the 4th fire station off of Kimball Bridge Road. There is no data to support that we need a 5th fire station. And likewise, when you look at our police, I know that my opponent is very fond of saying that we're shortchanging public safety. We don't have enough officers. Well, we have more officers today per capita than we've ever had in our history. And I don't know about you, but I'm a whole lot less concerned about the police rate than I am the crime rate. The crime rate is what you judge a city's safety based on. And so, I'm not sure that I'm directly answering your question. I think obviously if you're a smaller town, maybe you have some advantages, but just feel confident that we are doing everything that is rational and reasonable to support our police and fire and make sure that we have the best response available. Thank you.
I assume you want me to repeat this.
That's great.
So, do you think a city's population size influences where it could be considered safe? The safest cities in Georgia are their population. Sonoya is number 1, 5,000 people. Douglas, number 2, 12,000 people. Milton has 41,000 people, number 3. Johns Creek has 82,000.
I come from a family of first responders. My grandfather was a chief of police who was killed in the line of duty. I have an uncle who was a deputy sheriff, also killed in the line of duty. Another uncle who was a police officer, another uncle who was a fire chief. I have cousins who are chiefs of police today, so I understand public safety. The population doesn't have anything to do with it. It is the per capita that you have. How well you staff it. It doesn't matter if you have 100 people or 1,000 people. How well are you staffing what you have? So let's go through Johns Creek and let's see who the police chief agrees with. When I was doing my own due diligence, I looked at Johns Creek comparative to our surrounding neighbors. Our surrounding neighbors have a sworn police officer for every 500 to 800 people. Johns Creek has a police officer for every 1,012 people. We are falling behind. Our neighboring cities have a fire station that serves every 8,000 to 14,000 people. Johns Creek has a fire station for every 21,250 people. If you read the police chief and the fire, if you read their letters and their multi-year plans that were suppressed from the public and from the budgeting process, you will see that the police chief says we are 28% below surrounding cities with sworn officers. You will also see where he says crime is increasing. He is talking about we're falling below with the sworn officers and the crime is increasing. That's why we're no longer the safest city. We're not even on the list of 100 safe cities, and that's why we've moved down to number 5 in Johns Creek, because violent crime and property crime is increasing. The math is easy on this.
You're right there. Okay, Kelly, please speak to your views on the value of independence in your role. Provide an example from your public service experience.
Of my, like when I was on the city council, or
Please speak to your views on the value of independence in your role, which I assume will be the mayor. Provide an example from your public service experience.
I think independence is important. The mayor's role is set up different than the city council's role. But I will give you an example of where I was on the city council. So when I was on the council, we had votes 7-0, 6-1, 5-2. We were never 4-3, 4-3, 4-3, like what you see today. And many times I was that one lone vote. I can tell you when I was that one lone vote on a couple of occasions. One was with massage parlor ordinances. One was with the life at Rumbelow and Nesbitt-Ferry. I fought for those, and I would not give up on them. And I ended up making them a campaign issue, and other people lost their seats because they wouldn't deal with the safety issues that were transportation on Rumbelow and Nesbitt-Ferry. The massage parlor ordinance, I pushed for that, and we finally had a massage parlor ordinance that was in place when we got a new council to come on, because those were fronts for human trafficking. So there are many times, I'm not a perfect person at all, but I'm always going to try to do what is right and what is best for Johns Creek. And when I believe that it's right, I will stand if I have to stand alone.
Can you repeat?
Okay. So I think about this often. There's a presidential historian named Arthur Beschloss. I don't know if any of you would be familiar with that, but he talks about in studies of presidents that you see the things that these public officials do in public, and those things are important. But he says that the thing that's really critical is that you have confidence in that person to do what is right when the cameras are not there. And I can tell you that there are a lot of instances. Some of them are sometimes incredibly small. Sometimes they're a matter of pomp and circumstance or etiquette or just different things. But sometimes they're more important about a judgment call that you really know that your ethics, your moral compass is being tested. And I've said this before. I think it's probably a little bit of a strange thing that I say, but I trust myself. I trust myself that I am going to do what I know that I believe to be right, and right by all of you. I will say this about the council. I think that there has been, over time, a growing concerted campaign to try to make the votes 4-3. And at the last forum that we had, there was a statement that my opponent's going to be a compromiser, or someone's going to bring everybody together in consensus. But that exact same day, there was a full-page ad in the Johns Creek Herald saying, vote for her and these 3 candidates. So it doesn't seem like it's about consensus or compromise or trying to build coalitions. It's more about control and just simply trying to choose who the council members are going to be. I'm not purposely.
Okay, John. The U.S. unemployment rate reached 4.3% in August 25, the highest in nearly 4 years, signaling a continued slowdown in the job market. Many JC residents have been laid off, and many struggle to pay their bills, including city taxes. As mayor, how would you guide the city through the economic storm?
I think that one of the most important things is that we try to live within our means, which goes back to the rollback rate. It goes back to simply trying to have a footprint that's not too big. When you look at the city of John Street versus some of our sister cities, we have many fewer full-time employees. We tend to get more done with less. I do think that it's something that, if we do go into recession, I think that it's very important that we appreciate the rollback rate, that we not raise taxes on John Street families. That's not going to help any. And there is always more money coming into the city. Don't worry that your city government is handing them out. That's not the case. We have new growth that we get additional revenue from. There are many different revenue sources. But again, my standard is the rollback rate. That's not an election year thing. I ran on that when I ran for council 8 years ago. I've consistently been for that. And I think I'm probably the only mayor that I know of that submits a budget to its council built on the rollback rate. And the reason for that is because I want it to be difficult for us to engage in new spending beyond what we can afford. And I think that by doing a budget built on the rollback, that means that there will not be a tax increase built into the budget, and it means that if a council member does want to increase spending, that they would have to have a very good justification in how we would balance the budget.
Kelly, the U.S. unemployment rate reached 4.3% in August of 2025, the highest in nearly 4 years, signaling a continued slowdown in the job market. Many Johns Creek residents have been laid off, and they struggle to pay their bills, including city taxes. As mayor, how would you guide the city through the economic storm?
Recently, the mayor went to speak to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners to tell them that they didn't have a revenue problem, they had a spending problem. Well, I will tell you, Johns Creek has a revenue problem and a spending problem. We have manipulated our revenues by increasing the loss. We have cut our services and projects that are critical. What we need to do is to stop deficit spending. I'll give you some examples. Parks bond. We approved that in 2016. $40 million. It had 13 projects on it. The parks are not completed. It would take $18 million to finish those parks. You look at the Boardwalk Park, now that it's changed names 3 times and budgets 3 times and it's still growing, that spending just keeps on and on and on. You look at this Performing Arts Center, that will forever increase our taxes. There's no utilization plan, there's no business plan, we don't know what the operational losses are. It is reckless spending is what that is. So we need to pull our revenues in. We need to stop this wasteful and deficit spending. We need to build our reserves, and we need to complete our capital projects, but not just complete them as they are today. Those, the way that they are listed, is not a priority of critical services first, essential services second. So there are plenty of things that Johns Creek can do to rein it in, and we have got to stop the wild spending that we're on and the falsification and the manipulation of increasing these revenues.
Kelly, subject is gross density. The concept of gross density was recently a major controversy of the rezoning case in Shake-Rag area. Would you support amending the city's zoning ordinances to refine density calculations in the situation where gross density appears to misrepresent actual housing density? If so, how would you amend the ordinances?
Yes, I am interested in net density, because with gross density, that's the total land that you have to look at for roads, for all the infrastructure around it. We need to ensure that it is net density and that it's the totality of the land that can be used for the home that's being constructed or whatever the minimums are. So yes, I totally support changing it.
The theme of tonight is a war on reality. There is the facts on the ground, and there is the record that we have. It is a fantastic thing responsibility to go forward and join a group that is trying to protest a development. I can tell you that I would never do something like that, one, because I would be violating my oath, but two, because I'm not going to cede my future potential authority or responsibility in case the city is sued by one of the parties. My opponent just sat there and tried to make it sound like that, oh yes, it should definitely be on the net, not on the gross. But when she was on council, that's not what the concern was. It was definitely on the gross. And our current comprehensive land use plan is on the gross. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Kelly, the concept of gross debt. Sorry about that. Did I mess myself up? Yes, I did. We went out of order. I apologize. Let's try to get back on track. Kelly, zoning ordinance pushback is the subject. Some municipalities in the U.S. are pushing back against existing zoning ordinances as they apply to new housing development. For example, they seek to relax height and density restrictions with multifamily units and allow accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in detached single-family districts. These ADU changes can, and in some cases, double the density of neighborhoods and undermine any semblance of housing appeal for existing homeowners. Do you support these types of changes? And please explain your answer.
I do not support those types of changes. I think that Johns Creek is very much developed, and if you think about when we became a city in 2006, we had 62,000 people. Today, almost 20 years later, we have got 85,000 people. I want to keep everything as conservative as we can. And when the mayor ran, he was all about protect Johns Creek. I am not for high density. But let's look at the record. This medley that's coming in, it was just going to be a town center. But then housing got added. Housing got added to the tune of 750 apartments, 133 townhomes, and then he has changed the density out in Shadrack to allow for another 189 homes. That is huge. And so that area in McGinnis Ferry and out there in Shadrack, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So no, I do not want, I want us to have conservative growth. I do not want high density. We are a bedroom community, a large bedroom community, but we need to protect Johns Creek.
Okay, John. Where were we here?
Same question.
Yeah, I know. Just give me a second. Some municipalities in the U.S. are pushing back against the existing zoning ordinances as they apply to new housing development. For example, they seek to relax height and density restrictions with multifamily units and allow accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in detached single-family districts. These ADU changes can, in some cases, double the density of the neighborhoods and undermine any semblance of housing appeal for existing homeowners. Do you support these type of changes, and please explain your answer?
I oppose ADUs, and I don't want to be in here constantly having to go back and compare what's being said. What am I supposed to do? I'm being criticized for the high density that was approved at Embry Farm, but my opponent approved 3 times as much density in Shadrack with Belmont Park. Look, yes, there are apartments and townhomes in Meadow. the only time in my little political career that I will vote for apartments. I never thought I would vote for apartments. But for those of you that are familiar with Avalon, you know that the residential component is a key part of making that viable, making Medley viable, making the town center viable. And those are high-end, owner-occupied. And so, to me, there was a trade-off, and I was willing to go along with that. You know, to sit there and say something about apartments in general, I think is disingenuous if a person also voted to approve multiple apartment projects. But, look, the bottom line is our community never had a town center. It was a dream, it was a goal, it was, would it ever happen? You said that you wanted that. I did everything I could as your mayor to deliver that. It's coming out of the ground. It's going to be open and available for us to enjoy next year.
Okay. Both of you have had time on city council, and public safety has been a big item, and you have a track record, each of you. So John, when you were a city council member, and I believe this was when they were considering the shark fin fire station, and you were interested in a mobile truck of some kind that was like fire, an ambulance, etc., and you were pursuing that, and it never happened, and I never quite understood where you were going with it. Can you explain the basis of that, and what was that all about?
Well, so doing due diligence before you're going to invest in a permanent structure, another fire station, because the geographic regions that had that slower response that I talked about earlier, I was just very interested to see if there was any validity to what I had read about in some research called a quick response vehicle. And basically I just asked for the fire department to take a look at it. They did some testing, and the data didn't come back that was the way to go. And we moved forward with the Ford Fire Station. And I will just say this, that the fire station concept in general, you should know that the vast majority of what they do is typically not a fire emergency response. It is around 5% of the calls that they receive that are for fires, and only about half of that is a structure fire. Everything else is more medical. So that's kind of the rationality of thinking that was behind that at the time. That's part of my greatest hits from the Golden Oldies. That's 6 years ago.
Kelly, when you were on city council, there was a radio problem that existed where the radios for both fire and police had to work inside the buildings. And the problem existed in Shakespeare. But when you were on council, you bought a piece of property right adjacent to the Johnson Creek High School baseball field and football field. And the plan was to do a super tower that was going to be taller than the Statue of Liberty, that had lights to make sure that helicopters and planes couldn't hit it. And it was more like a lightning bomb. And so that didn't happen because of this community really getting crazy. Can you explain the basis and why you would go the way you did when the problem didn't even exist here?
We looked at different land that we had to acquire or where we could put it, and the staff recommendations came back with us with that. Remember, the city council is the policy-making one. The operations, that's the staff. The staff came forward recommending that, and when the public came back and said, no, basically not in my backyard, nobody's going to want to have that kind of tower there, we immediately listened to the public and changed it. I mean, that's the bottom line, pure and simple.
You know the genesis.